I want you to think about something you love to do the most, whether that's sports, art, music, or anything. Think about how it makes you feel right now. Just think about it. Okay, good. When I was about 7 years old, my dad took me to my first football game. I didn't know who was playing or what was even going on, but one thing I did know was that it was the most exciting and the most exhilarating sport I ever laid my eyes on. Later that day, I went to my mom's house. I told her about what I experienced watching that football game, and the very next year I threw on the pads and I never looked back. However, my story may not be what most people experience. Over time, football has developed to become one of the most popular pastimes in America. An organization, Statistica, surveyed 2,200 18-year-olds over the course of 2 days. They were asked if they were an avid fan, a casual fan, or not a fan at all of American football. They found that 37% were avid fans, 35% were casual fans, and 28% were not fans at all. So you could say at least 72% of people are football fans to some degree. Although football is predominantly American, it can be enjoyed worldwide. American football has come a long way from where it started to where it is today. However, it would take time for football to get to that point. For as long as humans existed, there has always been competition. It is quite literally in our human nature to have competitive drive, especially within males. But where did this all come from, one might ask? Although football stems back about 150 years, the roots can trace back as far as 2500 BC in Europe. Ancient ball games such as Harspatuum and Experios were common games played amongst each other. Galen, a Roman philosopher at the time, described the game as better than wrestling or running because it exercises every part of the body, takes up little time, and costs nothing. Meanwhile, in the Americas, the Mayans and Aztecs played on a stone-lined court where the inhabitants would also perform religious rituals. These games would become the basis for American football. Now, what about football itself? During the mid-19th century, football was under development as it was tied to rugby. Ivy League schools such as Harvard and Yale implemented football in their schools. Now, at the time, football was seen as a very violent version of soccer, and most schools banned football altogether. The first game was played in 1869 between Rutgers and Princeton. Although it looked different to today's game, it was the first progressive step to what we know today. And by 1876, the other Ivy League schools and prestige schools along the East Coast implemented football as well. And by 1905, the NCAA was formed. So you begin to see how the sport evolves and how athletes evolve to become bigger, faster, and stronger than they ever have been before. Question is this increase of intensity beneficial to the safety and integrity of the sport? Now, it is up to the parents and authorities to make that call. But first, I want to show you both sides of the coin. Now, everyone agrees that football is a physically demanding sport that requires both physical and mental toughness. However, while some people believe football is necessary and beneficial, others believe it is a nuisance and rather detrimental. I believe the participation of high school football is a beneficial outlet for student athletes' growth on 3 accounts: the physical, mental, and social benefits. First point is the physical benefits. The World Health Organization defines physical exercise as any and all body movement that increases energy beyond resting levels. The Gatorade Sports Science Institute examined peak physical performance of high school football players. They noticed that the largest growth occurred between a player's 10th and 11th grade year, where they noticed there was a 31% increase in upper body strength, 36% increase in lower body strength. They also noticed that speed and agility was also greatest in their later years, such as their junior and senior year, due to the body mass and strength buildup over the years of training. Alongside is physical health. Physical health is defined as a state of complete mental, physical, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. Physical health has also shown to reduce metabolic syndrome, normalize blood lipids, and reduce muscle atrophy. Lastly, football increases motor skills in student athletes. Players have to run, jump, and quickly change direction, which increases cardiovascular endurance. Alongside adaptability and complex reaction time are also vital skills that football requires. In fact, one of the most important factors that play a part in a football player's success is their complex reaction time. Quarterbacks in particular have to have not only physical skill, but mental skill, with being the most important position on the field. They require hand-eye coordination, enhanced peripheral awareness, visual reaction time, and depth perception. A study by the National Library of Medicine examined the difference between children with and without motor proficiency. What they noticed is that the children with lower proficiency had lower aerobic capacity, strength, muscular endurance, and agility to their athletic counterparts. To recap, football helps improve physical performance, health, and motor skills. Next point is the mental impacts of football. Up to 25% of teens suffer from depression, with severity varying, of course. A 2015 study shows that non-active teens are 10 to 20% more likely to suffer from mental health issues. The Teen and Adolescent Mental Health Treatment Organization says exercise positively impacts levels of serotonin, a chemical that helps regulate mental health and stimulates the brain. Physical activity releases endorphins, reduces stress hormones, or a happy chemical. This is why you may hear football players say they get a rush from playing the game. Jack Ragland, a doctor in the Department of Kinesiology at IU Bloomington, claimed that single sessions of activity reduce anxiety, improve mood, and raise feelings of energy that last for several hours. Long-term participation can significantly improve conditions such as clinical anxiety and depression to a degree that rivals medication, both in adults and adolescents. In short, physical activity scientifically improves mental health. Additionally, mental health also teaches self-discipline. By definition, self-discipline is the ability to control one's thoughts, actions, and feelings. There's no surprise that football takes up a lot of time out of a player's day. In college, athletes spend 6 of their 7 days a week on their sport. In 1 Corinthians 9:24, it reads, "Do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get that prize." In order to perform at your peak ability, it takes a certain amount of self-discipline. When you're training for the football season, you need self-discipline to eat well, train frequently, and study the game to perform at the highest level. Lastly, football provides a number of emotional benefits as well. 75 to 90% of doctor visits are stress-related. Doctors suggest that at the very least 20 to 30 minutes of exercise is enough to better stress. This physical activity also helps at-risk children reduce their stress levels. Researchers studied roughly 9,700 children with rough home environments, such as physical, mental, and emotional abuse. They found that children in sports cope better and had better mental health as adults. This gives an idea of the emotional support these children sought after that the sport provides. The last and the most important point to address is the social benefits that football provides. On a personal level, I play football as a way of worship and to praise God. Many people have heard this verse before. God created mankind in his image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. This verse from Genesis 1:27 shows how God made us to be like him, to be creative as humans naturally desire. Another verse that may come to mind is Matthew 6:33. But first seek his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. This draws back to my previous point that the work and preparation that you put in will be a result of what you will get. Seek his righteousness and the blessings will come. Additionally, football creates unbreakable relationships. It teaches teens to be less selfish, to cooperate with one another, and to work as one unit. A coach once told me that football is the ultimate team sport. Although other team sports such as basketball or hockey requires 5 to 6 players, football requires 11 players on each side, or 22 players in total. Therefore, a tight bond with your teammate is crucial. When you're training in a weight room from the end of December to July, along with traveling to various cities, to camps and other events, this doesn't even include the season itself that takes a toll on a player's physical body. When you're enduring the same pain, the same experiences, and the same joy as one another, it creates an unbreakable brotherhood. This very reason can also play a part in why most children growing up in difficult home situations find football as an outlet. A RAND study showed that 52% of lower class parents have their children in sports, while 66% of middle to high class parents have their children in sports. But why, you might ask? Another study was able to conclude that the financial costs and time commitment were the main barriers. When there's a lack of money coming through the house, parents have to work more, which results in less opportunity for the child. Fortunately, 63% of school administrators have claimed that the costs for interscholastic sports have decreased over the last 5 years. In all, football, like a locomotive, cannot run if all the parts are not in sync and working together. Now, a person may disagree with my point of view. They might point out the safety concerns or lack thereof. Now, it is no secret that football is physically and mentally vigorous, and concussions have become a big debate. A concussion is a mild traumatic brain injury caused by a blow to the head. Symptoms can include a headache, nausea, fatigue, confusion or memory problems, sleep disturbances, and mood swings. 1.6 to 3.1 million people in the US suffer from concussions annually. 60% of those do come from football. However, over the years, science and technology have made various efforts to change this problem. An organization, Nice, ran a study on high school football players from 2009 to 2019 to track concussion rates. They found that from 2009 to 2013, there was a 10.7% increase in concussions. However, in 2014, the targeting rule was implemented. This was a rule that prevented players from using their head to make contact with another player's head. From that point forward, concussions dropped at a rate of 6.2% annually. Gambling has also brought issues as well. For those who do follow the NFL, you have probably heard of players receiving lengthy suspensions for gambling. Another issue is the idolization of these athletes. Most people might point out a certain level of favoritism that athletes will get from their administrators as they're bringing in all the attention and money into their schools. All this attention could lead to a certain amount of arrogance to these athletes. Although we cannot deny that these things do occur, as Christians we are made to serve and perform under the glory of God. Whether it has to do with the safety or morality of the sport, God teaches us to honor him in everything we do. In Romans 12:1 it says, "Therefore I urge to you, brothers and sisters, in the view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship." A question I offer you, the audience, to think about today is, what is the purpose of a human life? If we have no purpose, then is anything truly beneficial to us? God put us on this planet with a purpose to serve, compete, and entertain one another. God said that it is not good for man to be alone. To conclude, the participation of football is beneficial towards student athletes as it produces physical, mental, and social benefits, along with teaching life lessons that last a lifetime. Parents and authorities alike should take this into account as they understand both sides, what not only football, but all sports can teach. What drives me drives the world, but who drives the world drives me. The importance of the camaraderie and other things that will ultimately show how the pros outweigh the cons of this long-standing argument. Thank you.
Great job, Montress. We'll open things up for questioning.
How you doing, Montress?
Good.
Thank you for the presentation. How would you respond to someone who's not a fan of football and says that how is it wisdom, how is it obedience to God to take a perfectly healthy body that you've been given and use it in what they might describe as a very reckless manner?
Yeah, so I kind of stated before that we have to offer our bodies as a living sacrifice, and when you're sacrificing something, you have to have it in good condition. You can't just sacrifice something that's in bad condition, because that's not praising God. So you have to take care of yourself while you're doing something, because it's pretty much inevitable that you're going to get hurt. You know, things are going to happen when you're playing a sport like football. But what you can control is how you take care of your body when you do get hurt. So I would just say to people that, you know, it does matter how you take care of yourself when you're playing a sport like that.
Yeah, I have a similar question, Montress, and thanks so much for your presentation. I wondered how you'd weigh you did a great job, I felt, in your paper laying out the short-term benefits of football, like, you know, the emotional, physical, spiritual benefits of it. How would you respond to someone that said, but there's these long-term costs,
Right.
like in terms of, like, you know, it might cure depression in the short term, but you might have Alzheimer's someday. How do you weigh those things against one another?
Okay, so are you basically asking, like, how would it affect someone, like, later in their life?
What would you say to someone who said the long-term costs outweigh the short-term benefits?
Okay, I guess to answer your question, I did come across a study actually about the long-term effects that football does do. Now, to the previous point I made, that if you don't take care of yourself and you are playing reckless, it does affect you long term. If you know about, you know, like CT and stuff like that, that does affect a player after they're done playing. but someone who takes care of themselves, you know, you get more of the spiritual benefits out of that than any type of negative benefits. I know for me, like I've been playing football for over 10 years and I haven't had a single concussion, thank God for that. So, you know, when you're playing a sport like that, it all comes down to your mindset.
Thank you, Montress, for introducing football almost as a ministry in your presentation. I wanted to ask, because in some larger cities, and especially when you get into college and the NFL, of course, there's certain celebrity status that comes with football.
Yeah.
So how do we balance that character with all the media attention and things like that that goes with playing the sport? And you mentioned some of it in your reputation, but can you just elaborate?
Yeah, so I said earlier in my presentation about athletes kind of getting, you know, a certain level of favoritism that they get from, you know, higher ups from administration and whatnot. I guess to answer that, I guess I would say that, you know, it's all within yourself. I don't, like, okay.
You can use yourself as an example. How would you
Okay,
balance?
yeah, I'll use myself for example. Like, people know who I am because of me playing football, but I also know at the same time that if I do let those type of things get to my head, I can let other things affect my life. Because if I'm always focusing on football, or I'm always focusing on being strong, lifting weights or whatever, you know, it takes time away from me to focus on bigger things like my academics and stuff, because I still have to keep, you know, all A's and stuff like that while playing football. So you got to like discipline yourself. Kind of back to the point where I said about self-discipline. You have to discipline yourself, because if you don't, then you can start to forget about just the little stuff that, you know, keeps you from messing up.
So you've been playing, it's about 10 years?
Yeah, just over 10
Which
years.
means you started probably when you were like 7 or 8?
Yeah, I was 8, yeah.
How young is too young to play football?
Me personally, I'm not sure when, say if I had a son, when I would let him start playing football, but I can say from my experience, my dad, he did not let me play football until I was 8 because he knew about how, you know, it can, you know, affect a child's mind. If they take one wrong bad hit, you know, how much that could affect them. So I can kind of side with him there that playing at a very, very young age, like 5, 6, while the child's mind is still developing at a very young age, maybe not maybe that early, but I would definitely say maybe like 8, 9 years old, when they're starting to develop a little bit more, would be a good time to start to introduce how the sport works, stuff like that.
Montress, I appreciated, I mentioned this before, how you talked about these 3 different benefits that playing football has and,
Yeah.
and sports in general. Well, what do you say about academics? Did you come across anything on that? How does, is playing a sport helpful for students academically?
Yeah, it definitely is. Even playing high school sports, you have to keep like certain grades, at least for my team, for York High, we have to keep like certain grades to even be able to play. So that's a big motivation for a lot of guys who typically don't do well in school, that at the bare minimum, they're maintaining at least like a C average, so they're at least passing. I know for me, I'm kind of kept to a little bit of a higher standard with my parents, so I have to maintain at least all A's and stuff like that during the season. So it's all about your time management, you know, planning out your week and making sure you have everything in order. So when you do come across, like, you're not thinking, oh, I got to do this, I got to do that. You know, like, all right, I already know what I'm doing. All I got to do is just do it now.
And did you come across any research that supported that, what you just said?
About,
Like the connection between academic achievement and sports participation?
not in my research exactly, but I can definitely confirm from experience. Yeah.
Thank you.
What advice do you give the student that doesn't make the team?
Don't take it to heart, because football is a hard sport. So not everybody's, to be honest, not everybody's really built for it. So like, yeah, I wouldn't take it to heart too much, because sometimes it's just not your thing. Like, football is just not a sport for everybody. You do have to be physically tough. You can't be soft and play football. So you have to be tough physically, you have to be tough mentally to play the game. So for anybody who doesn't make the team, just find something else that you are good at, you know? It's not the end of the world. Yeah.
You talked about how there's a disparity, Montress, between different communities and how some lower-income communities have less sports participation. Do you have any practical recommendations for how sports participation could be increased in different communities?
Could you repeat that? Like, kind of clarify a little bit.
Yeah, so my question is, what can be done to make sure that everyone has access to play sports in high school,
Oh, okay.
middle school or high school?
So I mentioned it before that about 63% of school administrators have said that over the last 5 years, the cost has decreased. And for interscholastic sports, it usually doesn't, well, you don't pay anything unless you're paying for like your own accessories and stuff. So, you know, not having to pay for anything, that definitely brings a lot more attention to it. Because like, for example, other sports, if you're trying to play like hockey or something, it's very expensive to play. I know that from my friends telling me how expensive hockey is, so it kind of pushes away a certain like demographic of people because they don't want to pay that much for a sport. But a sport like football or basketball, you know, stuff that doesn't pay or that doesn't cost much, it tracks in a lot bigger group of people.
Great job, Montress.
Yes.